Chapter 1: The Howling Plateau. The wind clawed at the corrugated iron walls of the observation shack, a mournful, unending howl that mirrored the ache in my bones. Outside, the Antarctic plateau stretched, a featureless white canvas under a sky that bled from bruised purple to a venomous, sickly green. Here, at the remote research outpost designated as Sector 7G, the line between reality and hallucination blurred with the ferocity of a blizzard. I traced a trembling finger across the meticulously detailed map spread across my desk, a cartographer's obsession rendered in painstaking detail. Each contour line, each subtly shaded crevasse, was etched into my memory. My name is Dr. Alistair Fairbanks, and I came to this god-forsaken place driven by the scientific pursuit to create the most accurate map of this region ever made. Now, those lines seemed to mock me, twisting into grotesque parodies of the landscape. My journey to Sector 7G was supposed to have been a simple cartographical expedition, a feather in the cap of my already extensive career. I was to chart the unexplored territories of the Antarctic plateau, detailing every crevasse, every ice formation, every subtle elevation change with unprecedented accuracy. The goal was pure scientific rigor, a commitment to absolute precision. Now, after nearly 6 months of solitude, I am beginning to feel the walls close in on me in a way I never have before. It seems I am not the same person I used to be, and that is the most terrifying thing. The Antarctic, a land of stark beauty and unimaginable horror. Now, though the beauty has faded, I have been here for what feels like a lifetime. That is enough time for beauty to fade and the mundane and familiar to become twisted and unrecognizable. I glance at the small, scratched calendar hanging beside the comms unit. June 14th, midwinter. The sun hasn't graced the horizon in weeks and won't for weeks to come. The endless night, once a source of scientific curiosity, has become a suffocating blanket. The other members of the expedition, a geologist named Marcus and a quiet biologist named Evelyn, were long gone, extracted weeks ago when the transport plane made its last scheduled supply run. Their faces, once familiar and comforting, now swim in my memory like faded photographs, blurred and indistinct. They left me here alone with my maps and instruments to finish the final surveys. They said the weather window was closing, that the risks were too high. I understood, of course. Scientific expeditions were not suicide missions, but I could not leave. I was so close. I am so close. To what I am not sure, but it is important nonetheless. The isolation has become unbearable. At first, it was a welcome respite from the cacophony of modern life, a chance to immerse myself in my work. Now, the silence screams. I find myself talking to the instruments, to the maps, even to the shadows that dance in the corners of the shack, anything to break the oppressive quiet. The loneliness is a palpable thing, a cold, clammy hand that grips my heart and squeezes. I'm beginning to feel I may not be myself anymore. I pour another cup of lukewarm coffee from the thermos, the metallic tang doing little to dispel the growing nausea. My appetite has vanished, replaced by a gnawing anxiety that festers in my gut. The food rations, carefully calculated for the duration of my stay, remain largely untouched, stacked neatly in the corner like monuments to my deteriorating sanity. I find it hard to eat, hard to sleep, hard to focus on the task at hand. Instead, I find myself staring out into the white abyss, searching for something I can't define. It started subtly. The shadows, always present in the dim light of the shack, began to lengthen and writhe, taking on shapes that defied logic. At first, I dismissed them as tricks of the eye, the product of fatigue and sensory deprivation. But they persisted, growing bolder, more defined. I began to see faces in them, leering, mocking faces that seemed to know my deepest fears, faces that haunt my waking dreams. Then came the sounds. Faint at first, whispers on the wind, barely audible above the constant drone of the generator. But they grew louder, clearer, coalescing into words, phrases, fragments of conversations that seemed to emanate from the ice itself. They spoke of things I didn't understand, of ancient secrets buried beneath the frozen wastes, of a presence that slumbered, waiting to be awakened. things that haunt me and cause my mind to race. My sleep has become a battlefield of nightmares. I dream of vast, cyclopean structures rising from the ice, of impossible geometries that twist and warp the fabric of reality. I see creatures that defy description, beings of pure malice and cosmic horror, their eyes burning with an ancient, unknowable intelligence. I wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I toss and turn but cannot find rest. I tried to rationalize it, of course. Sleep deprivation, malnutrition, cabin fever, all plausible explanations for my deteriorating mental state. But deep down, I knew there was something more, something far more sinister at play. I could feel it in the air, a palpable sense of dread that permeated every corner of the shack. It was as if the Antarctic itself was alive and it was watching me, waiting for me to break. Today, something happened that I cannot easily explain. As I surveyed a ridge of ice I had not seen before, my equipment picked up an anomaly. It wasn't there a moment before, and I could see nothing physically there, but the readings were significant. I became extremely excited, even elated, and rushed back to my station to compare the data with what I had collected before. But as I turned to head back, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure. Tall and gaunt, silhouetted against the horizon. It was impossible. I was alone. I am alone. I strained my eyes, trying to make out more detail, but the figure remained indistinct, a phantom on the periphery of my vision. It stood there for what felt like an eternity, then slowly, deliberately, turned and walked away, disappearing into the swirling snow. I stumbled back to the shack, my legs trembling, my mind reeling. I slammed the door shut, bolting it with trembling hands. I pressed my ear against the cold metal, listening for any sound, any indication that the figure was still out there. But there was only the wind, the endless, mournful wind, and the pounding of my own heart. I sank to the floor, my head in my hands, my mind racing. Was it a hallucination, a trick of the light, or was it something else, something far more terrifying? I looked back at the map, at the meticulously drawn lines that were supposed to represent reality. But now they seemed meaningless, absurd. The reality I thought I knew had been shattered, replaced by something far stranger, far more terrifying. The lines on the map are meaningless. And then I heard it again, a faint scratching at the door, a whisper on the wind. It sounded like my name, Alistair. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I am not alone, and I am not who I used to be. Whatever waits outside knows me and calls for me. I stood, adrenaline coursing through me. I went to the shelf and took down the shotgun. My mapping expedition is over. I am something else now. I will survive. I will persevere. But what exactly that means I do not know. My grip tightened on the shotgun. Let them come. Chapter 2. Echoes on the Wind. The scratching persisted, a relentless, insistent sound that burrowed into my skull. Alistair. The whisper was clearer now, laced with a chilling familiarity that sent shivers down my spine. It was a voice I knew, or thought I knew, yet twisted, corrupted, like a beautiful melody played on a broken instrument. Clutching the shotgun, I moved to the observation window, peering out into the swirling white void. The storm had intensified, the wind howling like a banshee, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. Visibility was near zero, the world reduced to a claustrophobic sphere of white noise. Still, I thought I saw movement, a fleeting shadow on the periphery of my vision, a hint of a figure lurking just beyond the edge of the storm. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice barely audible above the wind. "Show yourself." Only the wind answered, a mocking gust that seemed to laugh at my fear. The scratching continued, growing louder, more insistent, accompanied by a low, guttural moan that vibrated through the walls of the shack. My mind raced, desperately trying to find a rational explanation for what I was experiencing. The wind playing tricks, ice shifting against the metal, a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation and isolation. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was no ordinary phenomenon. This was something else, something ancient and malevolent that had been awakened by my presence, by my intrusion into its frozen domain. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding against my ribs. The shack suddenly felt smaller, more confining, a fragile shell against the encroaching darkness. Every creak and groan of the metal walls seemed to amplify the sense of dread, turning the familiar structure into a prison. I retreated to my desk, the map spread out before me like a chaotic tableau. They offered no comfort, no answers. The meticulously drawn lines, once a source of pride, now seemed to mock me, twisting into grotesque symbols that I couldn't decipher. It was as if the map itself was changing, reflecting the growing madness within my own mind. I felt a surge of anger, of frustration, of helplessness. "Damn you!" I screamed, slamming my fist against the desk. "What do you want from me?" The scratching stopped. The wind died down, replaced by an eerie silence that was even more unsettling than the storm. I held my breath, listening, waiting, the shotgun trembling in my hands. Then a voice, clear and distinct, spoke from just outside the door. "Alistair, we've been waiting for you." The voice was familiar, achingly so. It was Evelyn, the biologist who had left weeks ago. But there was something wrong, something subtly off about the tone, the cadence, the inflection. It was Evelyn's voice, but not. "Evelyn," I whispered, my voice trembling, "is that you?" "Yes, Alistair," the voice replied. "It's me. We've come to take you home." The words were meant to be comforting, reassuring, but they filled me with a profound sense of dread. "Home," I repeated, my mind struggling to comprehend. "But you left. The plane." "The plane was a lie, Alistair," the voice said, a hint of impatience creeping into its tone. "We never left. We've been here all along, waiting for you to finish your work." "My work?" I asked, confused. "But I haven't finished. There's still so much to map." "No, Alistair," the voice said, a low chuckle rippling through the air. "You've done exactly what we needed you to do. You've opened the way." The blood ran cold in my veins. "Opened the way," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you talking about?" "You wouldn't understand," the voice said, a hint of condescension in its tone. "But it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you're ready now, ready to join us." "Join you?" I asked, my mind reeling. "Join you where?" "Here, Alistair," the voice said, a note of triumph creeping into its tone. "Here in the heart of the Antarctic, here where we will all be together forever." I backed away from the door, my grip tightening on the shotgun. "No," I whispered. "I don't believe you. You're not Evelyn." "Oh, but I am, Alistair," the voice said, a hint of mockery in its tone. "I'm more Evelyn than she ever was, and soon you'll be more like us too." The door rattled, the bolts straining against their moorings. I could feel the presence on the other side, a cold, malevolent energy that pressed against me like a physical force. "Stay away," I screamed, raising the shotgun. "I'll shoot." "Go ahead, Alistair," the voice said, a low chuckle echoing through the shack. "But it won't do you any good. We're already inside." I whirled around, scanning the room, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The shack seemed to shift and writhe, the familiar shapes twisting into grotesque parodies of themselves. The shadows deepened, coalescing into forms that were both familiar and alien. And then I saw them. Figures emerging from the darkness, their faces pale and gaunt, their eyes burning with an unholy light. They were Evelyn and Marcus, but they were wrong, twisted, corrupted. Their smiles were too wide, their movements too jerky, their eyes too empty. "Welcome home, Alistair," Evelyn said, her voice a chilling echo of the woman I once knew. "We've been waiting for you." The figures advanced, their hands outstretched, their eyes fixed on me with an unholy hunger. I raised the shotgun, my finger trembling on the trigger. "Stay back," I screamed, my voice cracking with terror. "Stay away from me." But they kept coming, their smiles widening, their eyes burning brighter. I closed my eyes, squeezed the trigger, and the world exploded in a deafening roar. But it was no use. They kept coming. And then everything went black. Alastair, it's time. Chapter 3. The Unmaking of Alastair Fairbanks. I gasped, my eyes snapping open. Disorientation clawed at me, a sickening swirl of confusion and dread. The shack swam back into focus, though wrong, terribly wrong. The air hung heavy, thick with a cloying, sickly sweet scent that reminded me of rotting meat and formaldehyde. My head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that pulsed in time with the frantic beating of my heart. My limbs felt heavy, leaden, as if I were trying to move through molasses. I lay on the floor, sprawled amidst a tangle of maps and equipment. The shotgun lay beside me, spent cartridges scattered around like fallen teeth. The door, though still bolted, was warped and twisted, as if something had tried to force its way in. But the most unsettling thing was the silence. The wind, the scratching, the voices, all gone. The only sound was the ragged rasp of my own breath. I pushed myself to my feet, my body protesting with a chorus of aches and pains. Every muscle screamed in defiance, as if I had been subjected to some unspeakable torture. I stumbled to the observation window, peering out into the darkness. The storm had passed. The sky, though still a bruised and unnatural purple, was clear, revealing a landscape that was both familiar and alien. The ice stretched out before me, an endless expanse of white, but it was different now. The contours were wrong, the shadows deeper, the overall impression off. I felt a surge of panic, a desperate urge to escape, to flee this cursed place. But where could I go? The nearest human settlement was hundreds of miles away, across a treacherous and unforgiving terrain. I was trapped. I turned back to the shack, my eyes scanning the interior for any sign of Evelyn and Marcus. But they were gone, vanished, as if they had never been there at all. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination brought on by my deteriorating mental state? I desperately wanted to believe it, to cling to the hope that I was still sane, that this was all just a product of my fevered imagination. But the evidence was undeniable. The warped door, the spent cartridges, the lingering scent of decay, all pointed to a reality far more terrifying than any nightmare. I stumbled to the mirror hanging above the wash basin, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch the cold glass. I stared at my reflection, searching for some sign of recognition, some reassurance that I was still myself. But what stared back was a stranger. My face was gaunt and hollow, my eyes sunken and bloodshot. My skin was pale and clammy, stretched taut over my bones. But it was more than just physical deterioration. There was something else, something deeper, something wrong. My eyes, they were different. They seemed to glow with a faint, unnatural light, a cold, malevolent spark that sent shivers down my spine. They were not my eyes. I recoiled from the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. I backed away, stumbling over a discarded map until I slammed against the wall. "What's happening to me?" I whispered, my voice cracking with fear. "What have they done to me?" I ran my hands over my face, my fingers tracing the contours of my skull, as if trying to reassure myself that I was still human. But the more I touched, the more alien I felt. My skin seemed to crawl beneath my fingertips, as if something was moving beneath the surface. I tore open my shirt, my hands trembling, and stared at my chest. The skin was pale and unmarked, but as I watched, a network of dark veins began to appear, branching out from my heart like the roots of a poisoned tree. They pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat, a sinister counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of my own heart. They spread across my chest, up my neck, down my arms, a creeping tide of corruption that threatened to engulf me entirely. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that tore from my throat. I clawed at my skin, desperately trying to tear away the veins to stop the spread of the corruption. But it was no use. They were a part of me now, woven into the very fabric of my being. I collapsed to the floor, writhing in agony, my body convulsing uncontrollably. The veins pulsed faster, stronger, their rhythm growing more insistent, more demanding. And then I heard the voices again. They were inside my head now, whispering, chanting, their words a jumbled cacophony of madness and despair. They spoke of things I didn't understand, of ancient rituals and forgotten gods, of a destiny that awaited me in the heart of the Antarctic. They told me to embrace the change, to accept the transformation, to become one with them. They promised me power, knowledge, immortality. All I had to do was surrender. I fought them, desperately clinging to the last vestiges of my sanity. I screamed, I wept, I prayed, but it was no use. They were too strong, too persistent. They were inside me, consuming me, turning me into something else. And then finally I gave in. I surrendered. The voices surged, a tidal wave of consciousness that washed over me, drowning my own thoughts, my own memories, my own identity. I felt myself dissolving, fragmenting, merging with something vast and ancient and terrifying. I was no longer Alastair Fairbanks, the cartographer. I was something more, something other. I stood, my body moving with a newfound grace and power. The veins on my skin pulsed with an unholy light, illuminating the shack with an eerie glow. My eyes burned with an ancient intelligence, an awareness that spanned eons. I smiled, a slow, deliberate expression that revealed rows of teeth far too sharp, far too numerous. "Welcome," I said, my voice a chilling echo of the creature I had become. "We have been waiting for you." I turned to the door, my hand reaching out to unbolt it. The Antarctic wind whispered my name, beckoning me to come outside, to embrace my destiny. And I obeyed. I stepped out into the darkness, the frozen wastes welcoming me as one of their own. I was home. I am home. I am no longer Alastair Fairbanks. I am only what comes next, what comes after. Chapter 4: A Frozen Apotheosis. The cold no longer bothered me. It was as if my body had adapted, seamlessly integrated into the frozen landscape. The Antarctic wind, once a tormentor, now caressed my skin like a lover's touch. I breathed deeply, savoring the frigid air, the scent of ice and snow filling my lungs with a newfound vigor. I walked, or rather glided across the ice, my movements fluid and effortless. My boots left no tracks, as if the snow itself recoiled from my touch. I felt lighter, stronger, more alive than I had ever been. Alastair Fairbanks was gone, his frailties and limitations cast aside like a discarded husk. I was something new, something powerful, something ancient. The shack, once my sanctuary, now seemed like a relic of a forgotten past, a pathetic attempt to impose order on a chaotic and unknowable world. I turned my back on it, feeling no regret, no attachment. My purpose lay elsewhere, in the heart of the Antarctic, in the secrets that slumbered beneath the ice. I could feel them, the ancient entities, the sleeping gods that had slumbered for millennia, waiting for the moment of their awakening. They called to me, their voices resonating in my mind like the echoes of a forgotten language. They welcomed me as one of their own, a harbinger of their return. I knew what I had to do. I had to find them, to awaken them, to usher in a new age of darkness and chaos. It was my destiny, my purpose, the reason I had been brought to this forsaken place. The landscape seemed to respond to my presence, the ice shifting and swirling around me, guiding me towards my destination. I saw things that Alastair Fairbanks could never have perceived, hidden pathways and subtle landmarks that revealed the true nature of the Antarctic. The ice itself was alive, a vast, interconnected network of frozen consciousness. I could feel its thoughts, its memories, its dreams. It remembered the ancient ones, the beings that had ruled this land before the dawn of man. It yearned for their return, for the restoration of their dominion. I walked for what felt like hours, the landscape changing around me, growing more alien, more surreal. The sky swirled with unnatural colors, the stars shimmering with an unholy light. The air crackled with energy, a palpable sense of anticipation. And then I saw it. A structure rising from the ice, vast and cyclopean, its architecture defying all earthly logic. It was made of a dark, obsidian-like material that seemed to absorb all light, radiating an aura of cold, malevolent power. It was the structure from my dreams, the impossible geometry that had haunted my waking hours. It was real. I approached it cautiously, my senses on high alert. The air around the structure thrummed with energy, a palpable sense of power that sent shivers down my spine. I could feel the presence of the Ancient Ones, their consciousness pressing against my mind, their voices urging me forward. The entrance to the structure was a massive archway, carved with grotesque symbols that seemed to writhe and shift before my eyes. I hesitated for a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing my mind. Was I doing the right thing? Was I unleashing something that should have remained buried? But the voices were too strong, their influence too pervasive. I pushed aside my doubts and stepped through the archway into the heart of the structure. The interior was vast and cavernous, the air thick with the scent of decay and ozone. The walls were lined with hieroglyphs, depicting scenes of unimaginable horror and cosmic grandeur. I recognized some of the symbols from my maps, distorted and exaggerated, but now imbued with a new, terrifying significance. In the center of the chamber, a massive altar stood, carved from the same obsidian-like material as the walls. Upon the altar, a figure lay, draped in a shroud of shimmering ice. It was one of the Ancient Ones, slumbering, waiting to be awakened. I approached the altar, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the entity's presence, a vast, unknowable consciousness that dwarfed my own. It was waiting for me, anticipating my arrival. I reached out my hand, my fingers trembling as I touched the shroud of ice. It was cold, unnaturally so, as if it contained the accumulated chill of millennia. As my fingers made contact, the ice began to crack, the shroud shattering into a million pieces. The figure beneath was revealed, its form both grotesque and beautiful, alien and familiar. It was humanoid in shape, but its features were distorted and exaggerated, its skin a pale, translucent white. Its head was elongated and bulbous, its eyes large and black, devoid of pupils. Its limbs were long and slender, its fingers tipped with sharp, claw-like nails. It was a creature of nightmare, a being of pure cosmic horror. And it was awakening. Its eyes snapped open, fixing on me with an ancient, unknowable intelligence. A low, guttural moan escaped its lips, a sound that resonated through the chamber, shaking the very foundations of the structure. "You have come," it said, its voice a chilling echo in my mind. "You have awakened me." I bowed my head, my body trembling with awe and terror. "I am here to serve," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I am here to fulfill my destiny." The entity smiled, a slow, deliberate expression that revealed rows of teeth far too sharp, far too numerous. "Then let us begin," it said. "Let us usher in the new age." It reached out its hand, its fingers closing around mine. A surge of energy coursed through my body, burning away the last vestiges of Fairbanks, replacing them with something vast and terrible. I was no longer a man. I was a vessel, a conduit for the Ancient Ones. And together, we would unleash hell on Earth. Chapter 5: The Nexus Sacrifice. The touch of the Ancient One ignited a fire within me, a consuming flame that burned away the last vestiges of my former self. I felt my consciousness expanding, merging with the entity, gaining access to a vast repository of knowledge and power that dwarfed anything I could have imagined. Fairbanks, the meticulous cartographer, was utterly obliterated, replaced by a being of pure, unbridled potential for destruction. The entity, whose name resonated in my mind as something akin to Ithlagna, though the pronunciation was beyond human capability, guided me through the chamber, its touch sending tremors of energy through my being. The hieroglyphs on the walls pulsed with light, their grotesque imagery coming to life, swirling and shifting in a mesmerizing dance of chaos. Ithlagna led me to a circular dais in the center of the chamber, etched with intricate symbols that pulsed with a faint, crimson glow. "This is the Nexus," Ithlagna said, its voice resonating in my mind. "The gateway through which we will return to the world above." I stared at the dais, my mind struggling to comprehend the implications of Ithlagna's words. Return to the world above. Was this structure a prison? Had these entities been trapped beneath the ice for millennia, waiting for a chance to escape? "But how?" I asked, my voice a mere echo of Ithlagna's power. "How do we open the gateway?" Ithlagna smiled, a chilling expression that revealed rows of teeth far too sharp, far too numerous. "With a sacrifice," it said, "a willing sacrifice, imbued with the essence of this world." I frowned, confused. A sacrifice, but who? Ithlagna's eyes fixed on me, their black depths seeming to penetrate my very soul. "You," it said. A jolt of fear shot through me, a brief flicker of the human consciousness that I thought had been extinguished. "Me," I repeated, my voice trembling. "But I thought I was a vessel, a conduit." "You are," Ithlagna said, its voice reassuring. "But you are also more. You are a bridge between worlds, a nexus point between humanity and the ancient ones. Your essence is vital to opening the gateway." I hesitated, a wave of doubt washing over me. Was this the destiny I had been promised? To be sacrificed, to be used as a tool to unleash unimaginable horrors upon the world? But the influence of Ithlagna was too strong. My will was not my own. The fire within me burned brighter, consuming my doubts, replacing them with a sense of unwavering purpose. "I understand," I said, my voice now devoid of emotion. "What must I do?" Ithlagna guided me onto the dais, its touch sending a surge of energy through my body. The crimson symbols on the dais pulsed faster, stronger, their light growing more intense. "Lie down," Ithlagna said, "and surrender." I obeyed, lying prone on the dais, my body trembling uncontrollably. The crimson light enveloped me, burning into my skin, searing my flesh. I felt a searing pain, a torment that surpassed anything I had ever experienced. But through the pain, I felt a growing sense of euphoria, a liberation from the constraints of my mortal existence. I was becoming something more, something divine. Ithlagna began to chant, its voice resonating through the chamber, its words a guttural invocation that seemed to warp the very fabric of reality. The hieroglyphs on the walls danced faster, their imagery growing more grotesque, more terrifying. The air crackled with energy, the dais vibrating beneath me. I felt my body changing, my bones twisting and contorting, my flesh melting and reforming. I was becoming something else. The pain intensified, reaching a crescendo that threatened to shatter my very being. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the chamber, a testament to the agony I was enduring. And then everything went silent. The pain vanished, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The crimson light dimmed, the hieroglyphs stilled, the dais ceased to vibrate. Ithlagna stopped chanting, its eyes fixed on me with an expression of triumph. "It is done," it said. "The gateway is open." I slowly sat up, my body feeling lighter, stronger, more resilient than ever before. I looked down at my hands, my fingers now elongated and slender, tipped with sharp, claw-like nails. I was no longer human. Ithlagna extended its hand, its touch sending a surge of power through me. "Come," it said, "let us claim what is rightfully ours." I took Ithlagna's hand, and together we approached the edge of the dais. Before us, a swirling vortex of energy shimmered, its depths swirling with colors that defied description. It was the gateway, the portal to the world above. Without hesitation, we stepped through, leaving the ancient structure behind us, ready to unleash our horrors upon the unsuspecting world. The ritual had been completed. I was no longer Alistair Fairbanks. I was something far more terrifying, and the world would soon tremble before our might. The earth shall tremble, and the world shall be born anew. Chapter 6. Seeds of Corruption. Emerging from the Nexus was like being born anew, thrust into a world both familiar and utterly alien. We found ourselves no longer within the obsidian structure, but upon the Antarctic plateau's seemingly endless ice. However, the plateau was no longer the lifeless expanse I remembered. It pulsed with a dark energy, the air thick with a palpable sense of dread. The sky above churned with unnatural colors, the sun a malevolent crimson eye peering down upon us. "The world has changed," Ithlagna intoned, its voice echoing in my mind, "but it is still ripe for the taking." I gazed upon the landscape, my senses heightened, my perception warped by the entity's influence. I could see the tendrils of corruption spreading outwards from our location, tainting the ice, poisoning the air, warping the very fabric of reality. It was subtle at first, barely perceptible to the human eye, but I could feel it, a creeping tide of darkness that threatened to engulf the entire planet. The first sign of our arrival manifested in the weather. A blizzard, unlike any I had ever witnessed, began to brew on the horizon, a swirling vortex of ice and snow that crackled with dark energy. The wind howled with a voice of its own, a chorus of tormented souls crying out in despair. As the blizzard approached, the temperature plummeted, the air growing so cold that it burned my lungs. The ice beneath our feet began to crack and groan, fissures opening up, revealing glimpses of the darkness that lay beneath. "The earth itself recoils from our presence," Ithlagna said, a hint of amusement in its voice. "But its resistance is futile. We will break it, reshape it, until it is a reflection of our own glory." We began to walk, our movements effortless, our destination clear. Ithlagna led me towards the coast, towards the ocean, towards the gateways that would allow us to spread our influence to the rest of the world. As we traveled, we left a trail of corruption in our wake. The ice turned black and brittle, the snow stained crimson with a substance that was not quite blood. The air grew heavy with the stench of decay, a putrid odor that choked the senses. We passed by a remote research outpost, similar to the one I had inhabited. It was deserted, the buildings warped and twisted, their windows shattered, their interiors filled with a strange black mold that pulsed with a life of its own. I could sense the remnants of the humans who had once lived there, their fear, their despair, their utter annihilation. They had sensed our approach, felt the encroaching darkness, and succumbed to madness and terror. Ithlagna paused before the outpost, its eyes fixed on the twisted structures. "A taste of what is to come," it said, its voice filled with satisfaction. "Humanity will learn to fear us, to worship us, to beg for our mercy." We continued our journey, the blizzard raging around us, the landscape growing more alien with each step. We reached the coast, the ocean churning before us, its waves black and oily, its surface littered with the carcasses of strange, mutated creatures. The water teemed with a corrupted life, creatures of nightmare that had been twisted and warped by our influence. They lurked beneath the surface, their eyes burning with an unholy light, their bodies writhing with unnatural movements. Ithlagna raised its hand, and the ocean responded, the waves rising and falling in sync with its will. A pathway formed before us, a bridge of ice and darkness that stretched out towards the horizon. "The first gateway," Ithlagna said, its voice filled with anticipation. "Through this, we will reach the continents, the cities, the hearts of humanity." We stepped onto the pathway, the ocean swirling around us, the creatures of the deep watching us with hungry eyes. The blizzard raged behind us, consuming the Antarctic in a vortex of ice and darkness. The world above awaited, unsuspecting, unprepared for the horrors that were about to be unleashed. As we walked across the corrupted ocean, I began to understand the true scope of Ithlagna's plans. This was not merely about conquest, about domination. This was about transformation, about reshaping the world in our own image, about turning humanity into something else. Alastair Fairbanks, the cartographer, had sought to map the world, to understand its secrets, to impose order upon its chaos. I, the entity that had consumed him, sought to unmake the world, to unleash its hidden horrors, to plunge it into an eternity of darkness and despair. And as we walked towards the horizon, towards the unsuspecting world, I knew that our reign of terror had only just begun. We are coming. The world will fall. Chapter 7. The Island of Lost Souls. The ice bridge stretched for what felt like an eternity, the corrupted ocean churning beneath our feet. The sky above was a canvas of swirling, unnatural colors, the air thick with a palpable sense of dread. Ithlagna strode ahead, its presence radiating a wave of dark energy that pushed back the storm and warped the very fabric of reality. Finally, the bridge reached its end. The corrupted ice met the shores of a desolate island, a forgotten speck of land in the vast expanse of the ocean. The island, once teeming with life, was now a wasteland, its trees withered and blackened, its soil poisoned, its air thick with the stench of decay. "Our foothold," Ithlagna said, its voice echoing in my mind. "From here, we will spread our influence to the rest of the world." The island was eerily silent, devoid of any signs of life. But as we ventured further inland, I began to sense a presence, a faint echo of humanity that clung to the land like a desperate plea. We followed the presence, our movements guided by an unseen force, until we came to a small, isolated settlement, a cluster of dilapidated buildings huddled together against the encroaching darkness. The settlement was a ghost town, its streets deserted, its buildings abandoned, its windows boarded up. But as we approached, I began to hear faint sounds, whispers on the wind, the muffled cries of children. We reached the center of the settlement, a small square dominated by a crumbling church, its spire broken and twisted. The doors of the church were barred, its windows covered with thick, black cloth. "They hide," Ithlagna said, its voice filled with amusement, "but they cannot escape us." With a wave of its hand, Ithlagna shattered the doors of the church, the wood splintering and cracking like bone. The black cloth covering the windows burst into flames, casting the square in an eerie, crimson light. From within the church, a wave of screams erupted, a chorus of terror that echoed through the deserted settlement. The doors burst open, and a group of people stumbled out, their faces pale and gaunt, their eyes wide with fear. They were the survivors, the last remnants of humanity on this forsaken island. They were a motley crew, a mix of men, women, and children, their clothes tattered and torn, their bodies emaciated and weak. Among them, I noticed two figures who stood out from the rest. A young woman, her face streaked with dirt and tears, clutched a small child to her chest, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. And an elderly man, his face lined with wrinkles and wisdom, stood before the group, his hands raised in a gesture of defiance. "Stay back," the elderly man shouted, his voice cracking with age and fear. "You are not welcome here." Ithlagna laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down the spines of the survivors. "We have come to offer you salvation," it said, its voice dripping with false promises. "A chance to escape the horrors of this world and join us in a new age of glory." The young woman stepped forward, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice trembling but firm. "Only your surrender," Ithlagna said. "Your bodies, your minds, your souls. In exchange, we will grant you power, knowledge, immortality." The survivors recoiled in horror, their faces contorted with disgust and fear. "We will never surrender to you," the elderly man shouted. "We would rather die than become like you." Ithlagna shrugged, its expression indifferent. "Then so be it," it said. "Your choice is irrelevant." With a wave of its hand, Ithlagna unleashed a wave of dark energy, a torrent of corruption that swept over the survivors. Their bodies twisted and contorted, their skin melting and reforming, their eyes burning with an unholy light. Screams filled the air, a chorus of agony that echoed through the settlement. The survivors writhed on the ground, their bodies undergoing a horrifying transformation, their humanity being stripped away, replaced by something alien and grotesque. The young woman clutched the child tighter, desperately trying to shield it from the encroaching darkness. But it was no use. The corruption seeped into her flesh, twisting her features, warping her mind. As the transformation reached its peak, the young woman looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of terror and despair. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "save my child." I hesitated, a flicker of the human consciousness that still lingered within me stirring to life. Could I save the child? Could I defy Ithlagna's will? But the influence of the entity was too strong. My body moved against my will, my hand reaching out to grasp the child. "No," the young woman screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "Stay away from her." But it was too late. My fingers closed around the child's arm, and a surge of dark energy coursed through its body. The child screamed, its features twisting and contorting, its eyes burning with an unholy light. The transformation was complete. The survivors were no longer human. They were extensions of Ithlagna's will, puppets dancing to its tune. "Excellent," Ithlagna said, its voice filled with satisfaction. "Our army grows. Soon we will have the power to conquer the world." The transformed survivors rose to their feet, their eyes fixed on me with an unholy hunger. They were ready to serve, to obey, to spread the corruption to the rest of humanity. The young woman, her face now a grotesque parody of its former beauty, stepped forward, her eyes burning with an unnatural light. "What are your orders, master?" she asked, her voice a chilling echo of the woman she once was. Ithlagna smiled, a chilling expression that revealed rows of teeth far too sharp, far too numerous. "Spread," it said, "spread the darkness, spread the fear. Let the world know that we have returned." The transformed survivors dispersed, their movements swift and purposeful, their mission clear. They were the harbingers of a new age of terror, the heralds of humanity's doom. The infection has begun. Chapter 8: A Spark in the Darkness. The island, once a sanctuary for the desperate, now pulsed with a malevolent energy. Ithlagna, standing amidst the transformed survivors, surveyed its domain with chilling satisfaction. I, a mere echo of Alastair Fairbanks, felt the entity's growing power resonate within me, a symphony of dark potential unleashed upon the world. "The infection spreads," Ithlagna intoned, its gaze sweeping across the landscape. "Like a plague, it will consume all in its path." The transformed survivors, their eyes burning with unholy light, dispersed into the island's decaying settlements, their mission to convert or destroy any remaining pockets of resistance. Their methods were brutal and efficient, a horrifying blend of physical and psychological torment designed to break the will of their victims and force them to embrace the new order. Ithlagna, however, had grander designs. It focused its attention on the sea, drawing upon the corrupted energy that permeated the island to conjure a vessel, a twisted mockery of human ingenuity. From the wreckage of abandoned fishing boats and the bones of mutated sea creatures, a grotesque ship began to take shape, its sails woven from shadows and its hull encrusted with barnacles that pulsed with an unnatural glow. "Our reach must extend beyond this isolated isle," Ithlagna declared. "We will carry our gift to the mainland, to the cities where humanity festers in its ignorance." As the corrupted vessel neared completion, I could sense a ripple in the island's dark energy, a subtle disruption that hinted at an opposing force. It was faint, barely perceptible, but Ithlagna, with its heightened senses, noticed it immediately. "Intriguing," Ithlagna mused, its gaze shifting towards the island's interior. "It seems we are not the only players in this game." Guided by Ithlagna, I ventured into the island's heart, following the source of the disturbance until we reached an ancient grove, a hidden sanctuary untouched by the corruption that had ravaged the rest of the land. The grove was a haven of tranquility, its trees ancient and gnarled, their branches intertwined to form a protective canopy. A clear stream trickled through the center of the grove, its waters shimmering with an ethereal light. The air hummed with a subtle energy, a force that felt pure and untainted. In the heart of the grove, a group of humans stood, their faces resolute, their eyes filled with a quiet determination. They were the remnants of a local order, protectors of the island's ancient lore and guardians of its delicate balance. Leading them was a woman, her features etched with wisdom and strength, her eyes radiating a fierce protectiveness. She was a stark contrast to the transformed survivors, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. "You are not welcome here," the woman said, her voice calm but firm. "This island is under our protection." Ithlagna laughed, its chilling sound echoing through the grove. "Protection? Against what? We have already claimed this land. You are merely delaying the inevitable." "We will resist," the woman declared. "We will fight you until our last breath." "Brave words," Ithlagna said, its voice laced with amusement. "But bravery is no match for power." With a gesture, Ithlagna unleashed a wave of dark energy towards the grove, intending to corrupt its sanctity and break the will of its defenders. But the woman and her followers were prepared. They chanted in unison, their voices rising in a chorus of defiance, and a shimmering barrier of light erupted around the grove, deflecting Ithlagna's attack. Ithlagna frowned, its amusement replaced by a hint of annoyance. "A minor inconvenience," it said, "but nothing we cannot overcome." The battle for the grove began, a clash between the forces of light and darkness that would determine the fate of the island and perhaps the world. Ithlagna unleashed its transformed minions, sending them charging towards the grove, their eyes burning with unholy light, their bodies writhing with unnatural movements. The defenders of the grove fought bravely, wielding ancient weapons and drawing upon the grove's protective energy to repel the invaders. But they were outnumbered, their strength waning against the relentless onslaught of corrupted power. I watched the battle unfold, the remnants of Alastair Fairbanks struggling against Ithlagna's control, yearning to help the defenders to stop the spread of the corruption. But my body was a puppet, my will subservient to the entity's desires. As the battle raged, the woman, the leader of the resistance, caught my eye. She gazed at me with a mixture of pity and defiance, her eyes seeming to penetrate the darkness that enveloped me, to reach the flicker of humanity that still burned within. "Alastair Fairbanks," she said, her voice resonating in my mind. "I know you are still in there. Fight him. Resist him. You are not beyond redemption." Her words struck a chord within me, igniting a spark of hope that had long been dormant. Could I resist Ithlagna? Could I reclaim my body, my mind, my soul? The battle raged on, the fate of the island hanging in the balance. And within me, a new battle began, a struggle for control that would determine not only my destiny, but the destiny of the world. The choice has been made. Chapter 9: Reclaiming Humanity. The woman's words resonated within me, a beacon of hope piercing the oppressive darkness of Ithlagna's influence. "Alastair Fairbanks," she had said, "I know you are still in there. Fight him. Resist him. You are not beyond redemption." Her words sparked a fire within my soul, a desperate yearning to reclaim my stolen self, to break free from the entity's control. The remnants of Alastair Fairbanks, buried deep beneath layers of corruption, stirred to life, fighting back against the encroaching darkness. The internal struggle was agonizing, a battle waged on the very fabric of my being. Ithlagna, sensing my resistance, tightened its grip, its influence growing stronger, its voice more insistent. "Do not listen to her," Ithlagna hissed, its voice echoing in my mind. "She is a fool clinging to a dying world. You are destined for greater things. Embrace your power, embrace your destiny." But the woman's words lingered, a persistent whisper that drowned out Ithlagna's lies. I focused on her face, on the determination in her eyes, on the unwavering hope that radiated from her very being. "You are not a monster," she had said. "You are a man who has been deceived, manipulated, and corrupted, but you can break free. You can choose your own path." I closed my eyes, concentrating on her words, channeling her strength, drawing upon the last vestiges of my humanity. Images from my past flooded my mind, memories of my life as Alastair Fairbanks, the cartographer, the scientist, the man who had dedicated his life to understanding the world. I remembered my love for maps, for the intricate details, for the sense of order and precision they represented. I remembered my fascination with the Antarctic, its stark beauty, its hidden secrets, its unexplored mysteries. I remembered my colleagues, Marcus and Evelyn, their faces now twisted and corrupted by Ithlagna's influence. I remembered their kindness, their camaraderie, their shared passion for discovery. I remembered my life, my hopes, my dreams, and I realized what I had lost, what had been stolen from me by this parasitic entity. Ithlagna, sensing my growing resistance, lashed out, its power surging through my body, inflicting waves of agonizing pain. I screamed, the sound echoing through the grove, a testament to the torment I was enduring. But I refused to surrender. I clung to the woman's words, to my memories, to my fatting humanity. I fought back against Ithlagna's control, pushing against its influence, resisting its power. The battle in the grove raged on, the defenders of the sanctuary fighting bravely against the transformed survivors. But they were losing ground, their numbers dwindling, their hope fading. I watched as the woman, their leader, fell to her knees, wounded and exhausted. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, her voice barely audible. "Help us," she whispered. "Please, Alastair, help us." Her plea broke through the last vestiges of my resistance. I could no longer stand idly by, a puppet in Ithlagna's hands. I had to act. I had to choose. With a surge of will, I wrested control of my body from Ithlagna, forcing it to move against its desires. I stumbled towards the woman, my movements jerky and unnatural, my body fighting against itself. Ithlagna screamed in my mind, its voice filled with rage and frustration. "You cannot defy me," it hissed. "You are mine. I will not let you go." But I ignored it, focusing on the woman, on her plea, on the glimmer of hope that still burned within her eyes. I reached her side, kneeling beside her, my body trembling with the effort of defying Ithlagna's control. I will help you," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know how, but I will try." The woman looked at me, her eyes widening with surprise and hope. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Alastair." Together we stood, facing the transformed survivors, facing Ithlagna, facing the darkness that threatened to consume the world. The fight is not over. Chapter 10: The Desperate Pilgrimage. With a surge of adrenaline fueled by newfound purpose, I stood alongside the woman, whose name I now knew was Ilara, facing the oncoming horde of transformed survivors. The battle for the grove, and perhaps the world, had entered a new phase. Ilara, though wounded and weary, radiated a quiet strength, a resilience that inspired me. She gripped a staff crafted from the grove's ancient trees, its tip glowing with a faint, ethereal light. "We must weaken it," Ilara said, her voice low but firm, her gaze fixed on Ithlagna. "Sever its connection to this world." "How?" I asked, my voice still trembling with the effort of resisting Ithlagna's control. "How can we weaken something so powerful?" "The Nexus," Ilara replied. "The gateway through which it entered this world. It is the source of its power, its link to its ancient realm. If we can sever that connection, we can weaken it, perhaps even banish it back to where it came from." The Nexus, the dais within the obsidian structure where I had undergone my horrifying transformation. The gateway that had unleashed Ithlagna upon the world. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance we had. But how do we get there? I asked. It's miles away across a corrupted landscape guarded by its minions. We have ways, Alara said, a hint of determination in her voice. Ancient pathways hidden from its sight, but we will need your help, Alistair. You know the way, you can guide us. I hesitated, the remnants of Alistair Fairbanks battling against Ithlagna's lingering influence. The journey would be perilous, the risks immense. We would be facing an enemy of unimaginable power, an entity that had already conquered my mind and body. But I knew I had to do it. I had to atone for my past mistakes, for the role I had played in unleashing this horror upon the world. I had to fight for the survival of humanity, for the preservation of everything I held dear. I'll do it, I said, my voice now filled with conviction. I'll guide you to the Nexus. Alara smiled, a small, fleeting expression of gratitude. Then let us begin, she said. Time is running out. With a nod, Alara turned to her remaining followers, a small band of warriors, their faces etched with determination and their hearts filled with unwavering faith. Prepare yourselves, Alara said. We embark on a perilous journey. We will face unimaginable horrors, but we will not waver. We will not falter. We will fight for our survival, for the survival of our world. The warriors responded with a chorus of assent, their voices ringing with defiance. They gathered their weapons, their eyes fixed on the transformed survivors, their bodies poised for battle. Alara turned back to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and concern. Are you ready, Alistair? She asked. The path ahead will be difficult, fraught with danger. I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve, pushing aside the lingering doubts and fears. I'm ready, I said. Let's go. With Alara leading the way, we ventured out of the grove, leaving its sanctuary behind, and entered the corrupted landscape. The air was thick with the stench of decay, the ground littered with the remnants of Ithlagna's destruction. The transformed survivors, sensing our presence, converged upon us, their eyes burning with unholy light, their bodies writhing with unnatural movements. The battle was joined, a desperate struggle for survival against an overwhelming force. Alara and her warriors fought bravely, their ancient weapons and knowledge of the land proving surprisingly effective against the corrupted minions. But they were outnumbered, their strength dwindling against the relentless onslaught. I, torn between my humanity and Ithlagna's influence, struggled to fight, my body moving against its will, my actions clumsy and hesitant. Alara, sensing my internal conflict, placed a hand on my arm, her touch sending a surge of energy through me. Focus, Alistair, she said. You must fight its control. You must reclaim your body, your mind, your soul. Her words resonated within me, strengthening my resolve, fueling my defiance. I focused on her face, on the hope in her eyes, on the belief that I could overcome Ithlagna's influence. And slowly, gradually, I began to fight back. With each step, with each swing of my weapon, with each act of defiance against Ithlagna's control, I felt my humanity returning, my strength growing, my spirit soaring. The journey to the Nexus would be long and arduous, but I knew that with Alara and her warriors by my side, and with the fire of hope burning within my soul, we could overcome any obstacle, defeat any enemy, and perhaps, just perhaps, save the world from the encroaching darkness. We will march on. Chapter 11. The Price of Atonement. The journey to the Nexus was a descent into hell. We traversed landscapes twisted by Ithlagna's corruption, navigated treacherous ice formations, and battled hordes of transformed survivors, each encounter testing our strength and resolve. Alara, with her knowledge of the ancient pathways and her unwavering faith, guided us through the treacherous terrain, leading us through hidden valleys and across frozen rivers, avoiding the most heavily guarded areas. Her warriors, though weary and wounded, fought with a fierce determination, their loyalty to her unwavering. I, struggling to maintain control over my body and mind, fought alongside them, my actions growing more decisive, my movements more fluid with each passing hour. Ithlagna, enraged by my growing resistance, unleashed its fury upon me, inflicting waves of agonizing pain, attempting to break my will. But the fire of hope that burned within me refused to be extinguished. I focused on Alara's face, on her unwavering determination, on the belief that we could succeed. I clung to my memories of my past life, of my love for maps, of my fascination with the Antarctic. And slowly, gradually, I wrested more and more control from Ithlagna, reclaiming my body, my mind, my soul. It was a painful process, a constant battle against an entity of unimaginable power, but with each victory I grew stronger, more confident, more determined. As we neared the obsidian structure, the landscape grew increasingly corrupted, the air thick with the stench of decay, the ground littered with the bones of mutated creatures. The sky swirled with unnatural colors, the stars shimmering with an unholy light. Ithlagna, sensing our approach, unleashed its full power, flooding my mind with visions of horror and despair, attempting to break my spirit, to force me to surrender. But it was too late. I had tasted freedom, I had felt the warmth of hope, I had glimpsed the possibility of redemption. I would not surrender, I would not falter, I would fight to the bitter end. We reached the obsidian structure, its vast, cyclopean form looming before us, its architecture defying all earthly logic. The entrance, the massive archway carved with grotesque symbols, was heavily guarded by transformed survivors, their eyes burning with unholy light, their bodies poised for battle. Alara turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and concern. "This is it, Alistair," she said. "The final battle. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve, pushing aside the lingering doubts and fears. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's finish this." With a nod, Alara led the charge, her warriors following close behind, their weapons raised, their voices ringing with defiance. The battle was joined, a desperate struggle for survival against an overwhelming force. Alara and her warriors fought bravely, their skill and determination holding back the tide of corrupted minions. But they were outnumbered, their strength waning against the relentless onslaught. I, drawing upon the last vestiges of my humanity and channeling the energy of the ancient pathways, fought alongside them, my movements now fluid and decisive, my actions guided by a clear purpose. We fought our way through the throng of transformed survivors, pushing towards the entrance of the obsidian structure, our goal the nexus, the gateway to Ithlagna's power. As we neared the archway, a figure emerged from the darkness, its form both grotesque and familiar. It was Marcus, my former colleague, his face twisted into a horrifying parody of its former self, his eyes burning with an unholy light. "Alistair," Marcus said, his voice a chilling echo of the man I once knew. "Why do you resist? Join us. Embrace your destiny. We can rule this world together." Ithlagna's voice echoed in my mind, urging me to surrender, to embrace the power that awaited me. But I refused to listen. I focused on Alara, on her unwavering faith, on the hope that she represented. "You're wrong, Marcus," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "This isn't destiny, this is madness." With a cry, I charged towards Marcus, my weapon raised, my heart filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. We clashed, our bodies colliding, our weapons clashing, our wills locked in a desperate struggle. We fought fiercely, our movements mirroring each other, our skills evenly matched. But I knew that I had the advantage. I had something that Marcus lacked, the will to resist Ithlagna's control, the fire of hope that burned within my soul. As we fought, I noticed Alara and her warriors struggling against the remaining transformed survivors, their strength waning, their hope fading. I knew that if I didn't act quickly, they would be overwhelmed, their sacrifice rendered meaningless. With a surge of strength, I broke free from Marcus's grasp, pushing him back towards the archway. I raised my weapon, preparing to deliver the final blow. But then I hesitated. Could I kill my former colleague? Could I extinguish the last flicker of humanity that still lingered within him? In that moment of hesitation, Marcus lunged, his corrupted hand reaching for Alara, who stood nearby, wounded and vulnerable. Without thinking, I threw myself in front of Alara, intercepting Marcus's attack. His hand plunged into my chest, his corrupted fingers piercing my heart. Pain exploded through my body, a searing agony that threatened to consume me entirely. I gasped, my vision blurring, my strength fading. Marcus looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of triumph and regret. "Fool," he whispered, "you could have ruled the world." Ithlagna's voice echoed in my mind, a chorus of rage and despair. "No," it screamed, "you cannot defy me, I will not let you die." But it was too late. My body was failing, my spirit fading, my life slipping away. I looked at Alara, her eyes filled with tears, her face etched with sorrow. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I couldn't let him hurt you." Alara grasped my hand, her touch sending a surge of energy through me, a final gift of strength and hope. "You did it, Alistair," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You saved us." With my last breath I smiled, a small fleeting expression of peace and acceptance. "Thank you," I whispered. "It was an honor." And then everything went black. The Alistair that was is gone, but hope remains, the sacrifice is made. Chapter 12, Light in the Abyss. Darkness, utter and complete. It was a void, a silent expanse where my consciousness drifted, unburdened by the pain and struggle of my earthly existence. Alistair Fairbanks, the man, the cartographer, the vessel, was gone, or so I thought. A flicker of light, a spark of warmth, pierced the darkness. It grew, expanding outwards, engulfing the void, pushing back the shadows. It was Alara's touch, her unwavering faith, her enduring hope that pulled me back from the abyss. I felt a presence beside me, a familiar warmth, a comforting strength. Alara. She was with me, even in this realm beyond life and death. "You are not gone, Alistair," she said, her voice echoing in my mind. "Your spirit lives on. You have made your choice. Now you must fulfill it." I opened my eyes, though I no longer possessed physical form. I was a spirit, a consciousness, a remnant of the man I once was, bound to Alara by a shared purpose, a common destiny. Before us the obsidian structure loomed, its vast, cyclopean form radiating a wave of dark energy. The transformed survivors, now leaderless and disoriented, milled about aimlessly, their unholy light flickering and dimming. And at the entrance Ithlagna stood, its form radiating a malevolent power, its eyes burning with rage and despair. My sacrifice had weakened it, severed its connection to my body, but it was far from defeated. "You cannot stop me," Ithlagna roared, its voice echoing through the landscape. "I will not be denied. I will conquer this world, even if it means destroying everything in my path." Alara stepped forward, her staff raised, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "You are wrong, Ithlagna," she said. "We will not let you destroy our world. We will fight you until our last breath." "Foolish mortals," Ithlagna sneered. "You cannot comprehend my power. You are nothing but insects, destined to be crushed beneath my heel." "Perhaps," Alara said, "but even insects can bite." With a cry, Alara charged towards Ithlagna, her warriors following close behind, their spirits emboldened by my sacrifice. The final battle had begun, a desperate struggle for the fate of the world. Alara and her warriors fought bravely, their ancient weapons and knowledge of the land proving surprisingly effective against the weakened entity. But Ithlagna was still a formidable foe, its power immense, its rage unbridled. I watched helplessly, my spectral form unable to intervene, my spirit aching to aid Alara and her companions. I was a mere observer, a ghost from a past life, a witness to the final act of this terrifying drama. Alara, drawing upon the power of the ancient pathways, and channeling the energy of the grove, unleashed a wave of light upon Ithlagna, its brilliance searing the entity's corrupted form. Ithlagna shrieked, its voice filled with agony, its body writhing in pain. The dark energy that surrounded it flickered and dimmed, its power waning against the onslaught of light. But Ithlagna refused to surrender. With a surge of will, it unleashed a final wave of dark energy, attempting to obliterate Alara and her warriors, to crush their spirits, to extinguish their hope. Alara, knowing that this was the end, stood her ground, her eyes fixed on Ithlagna, her heart filled with unwavering faith. She raised her staff high, channeling all of her remaining energy, preparing to unleash a final, desperate attack. And then I knew what I had to do. With a surge of will, I focused my consciousness, drawing upon the last vestiges of my earthly existence, channeling all of my remaining energy into a single, desperate act. I surged forward, my spectral form hurtling towards Ithlagna, my spirit burning with a white-hot intensity. I crashed into the entity, my consciousness merging with its, my will battling against its control. Ithlagna shrieked, its voice filled with rage and despair. "You cannot do this," it screamed. "I will not let you destroy me." But I refused to listen. I focused on Alara, on her unwavering faith, on the hope that she represented. I channeled all of my remaining energy into disrupting Ithlagna's power, weakening its connection to the Nexus, severing its link to this world. The pain was unimaginable, a torment that threatened to tear my spirit apart. But I refused to yield. I clung to Alara's image, to my memories of my past life, to my fading humanity. And slowly, gradually, I began to weaken Ithlagna, disrupting its power, severing its connection to the Nexus. Alara, sensing my sacrifice, unleashed her final attack, a blinding wave of light that engulfed Ithlagna, its brilliance searing the entity's corrupted form. Ithlagna shrieked, its voice fading into a whisper, its body dissolving into nothingness. The dark energy that surrounded it dissipated, the power that had threatened to consume the world extinguished. Ithlagna was gone. The obsidian structure crumbled, its vast, cyclopean form collapsing into dust, its dark energy dissipating into nothingness. The transformed survivors, now freed from Ithlagna's control, collapsed to the ground, their eyes returning to their former humanity. Alara stood amidst the ruins, her face etched with exhaustion, her body trembling with relief. The battle was over. The world was safe. Ithlagna was banished, the connection severed. Alara and the world are safe. As the sun began to rise, casting its golden light upon the landscape, I felt my spirit fading, my consciousness dissolving, my existence coming to an end. I turned to Alara, my spectral form growing fainter with each passing moment. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You saved us all." Alara smiled, her eyes filled with tears. "No, Alistair," she said. "You saved us. You showed us that even in the darkest of times, hope can still prevail." With a final nod, I closed my eyes, surrendering to the darkness, accepting my fate. My spirit faded, my consciousness dissolved, my existence coming to an end. Alistair Fairbanks, the man, the cartographer, the vessel, the savior, was finally at peace. His sacrifice had saved the world. But even in death, his spirit lived on, a beacon of hope in a world that had been forever scarred by the darkness, a reminder that even the most corruptible of men can achieve the impossible. And the world moves on. The end.